Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first of hopefully many House of the Dragon spoiler-free discussions. The current short-term plan that we came up with like 30 seconds ago is that the spoiler-free discussions will be on this channel, and we will be doing spoilery on Shake's channel because, frankly, that just fits his channel better because he does like doing some Song of Ice and Fire deeper dive stuff because it's his favorite series. And we are going to be trying to do this regularly, which we should be able to for each episode. So this is going to be the spoiler-free version. And by that, I obviously do not, we will be spoiling episode 1 of House of the Dragon, but we will not be spoiling Fire and Blood by George R. R. Martin. And then the one that's after this, we will be spoiling Fire and Blood by George R. R. Martin. So if you were here for a discussion of House of the Dragon without spoiling Fire and Blood, here it is. And I will now allow my illustrious guest, Shake, who has been on the channel once already.
Yes, yeah, to discuss Fire and Blood.
He can introduce himself.
Yes, I'm Shake. I do book content very infrequently, but recently I've been doing House of the Dragon content more frequently. As Jake said, I'm a big Song of Ice and Fire fan, big Game of Thrones fan. So I was really, really hyped for this show and for this episode. I actually managed to see it early because of a premiere here, and then I saw it like 4 times since it has released in full length.
I, on the other hand, am a filthy casual and have only seen it once.
Wow.
So you're gonna, are you gonna? I'm the filthy casual in this conversation, and he's the he's been. I think he's probably, if he read as many pages of books as he did articles about House of the Dragon, he probably would have had his best ever reading month.
That is quite possible. My reading has slowed down since I read Fire and Blood because I've been consumed by a Song of Ice and Fire content, but that's fine. Do you want to start? Like, what did you like about the episode in general?
So first question is, what did you think of the episode? Like, how much did you like it?
I liked it a lot. Like, after my initial reaction, I gave it a 9 out of 10. Like, after it came out of the cinema, I would still stick by that. I do have some smaller issues with the episode. I don't think it's a 10 out of 10, and I know that Jake also agrees. Like, he's been having a discussion about what a 10 out of 10 means with several people. I really liked it. I enjoyed how they reintroduced the world. I like the visuals, especially like how different it looked from season 1 of Game of Thrones. Like, it actually looks like people have been saying like Westeros is supposed to look, and I kind of agree. And I was very happy with some smaller decisions they made. But we can get into that a bit later.
Yeah, and I'm in a similar boat. I think I'd also give it a 9. It would be closer to 8.5 than 9 for me, which is to say I thought it was a very good episode of television. I do not think it's one of my favorite episodes of television ever. I think, if you compare this to, peak Breaking Bad or peak Game of Thrones, it's not that close. Visually, it's about as good of an episode of television as I've ever seen. As you can tell, if you've ever heard me talk about season 6 of Game of Thrones, I am not super picky when it comes to CGI. And that unfortunately does work both ways. There will be shows that have bad CGI and some people will rip them apart, and I'll just be like, I don't really care that much. And then there will be shows that have really good CGI and I'll be like, I mean, it's good, but that's not, I don't think it's something that just affects my enjoyment as much as it does for other people for whatever reason. That being said, I think this did a really good job of setting up the story that I know it's going to have to tell in Fire and Blood, and establishing the characters and the sides. And I know, like, getting people to start guessing, trying to figure out what's going on with like the individual characters and trying to care about like the micro narratives as well as the like greater narrative. And I think knowing where things going makes me think this did an even better job. I think if I hadn't read Fire and Blood, I probably would have given this an 8 or an 8.5. But having read Fire and Blood, I'm giving this a 9.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I agree. Like, the setup of the story has been very good, and they made some decisions where I was like, okay, I didn't expect them to go that way, but it makes sense from a television point of view and also from a dramatic point of view to do it that way. Like, the birthing scene is one example. The way they did like Daemon and Viserys' scene at the end there was also like somewhat different than what was in the book, but it worked really well dramatically. So I agree. What would be your favorite scene out of the episode?
My favorite scene out of the episode. That is an excellent question. I mean, the horrifying scene is just really horrifying, so it feels weird to like. That's probably the best shot scene from like the storytelling perspective. I really liked the small council scene after that. I think Viserys, like this is also one thing that makes changes to the source material in this interesting is that this can actually, even if you change things from Fire and Blood, the two can coexist as canonical, because you can just be like, oh, the Maester just got it wrong. Like there's obviously the lore drop for the Targaryen, like that can coincide. Like that could also be true in Fire and Blood. It's just, it's a Targaryen secret. So the Maester writing Fire and Blood would have no knowledge of that. So it's the same thing like the Emma birth scene in Fire and Blood. I think it's just the throwaway passage, just like they're gonna have another kid and she died. Which that Maester was just like, I don't care about this, I only care the child. But obviously, you know, since we're not really following this, there's not really a perspective, but we're following this like from the perspective like of Alicent and Rhaenys, Targaryen names, Rhaenyra, Viserys, who's I know you brought up in our thing on your channel that George said people would be more interested in Viserys, and George, you were right. I'm more interested in Viserys. So I think they're doing that really well.
Yeah, this interpretation of Viserys is quite interesting. And regarding what you said with like Fire and Blood, I think it's actually interesting because you can even start arguing, okay, why would the Maester not include this stuff? Like with the birthing scene, it could be something like they're just what do you say? Like they're covering it up basically for Viserys to not make him look worse, because his characterization in Fire and Blood is like pretty weird, because it's like he's just a jolly guy who likes to throw parties, which I've heard a few discussions where people are like, why would he still be jolly after his wife dies? And like it doesn't really add up. So I think obviously that's more on George being like, okay, he's this guy, and then I'll focus on the other people. But like you can even start looking at like, okay, why would the Maesters obscure this stuff, even if they knew? But that's more Fire and Blood stuff. But
and also like I think you can tell he still is kind of oblivious to like political conflicts. He's just like he's just like, no, I just won't choose. He's like, Daemon is trustworthy. It's like, have you met Daemon? What has he done like, that is trustworthy?
Otto is a very, what did he say at the end there? He's a lawful and serving hand or something.
Yeah.
Yes. Obviously. But for me, like in terms of favorite scene, I personally love the last 5-6 minutes. I agree, like with the birthing scene, I do have some issues with how it was executed, with the juxtaposition. I think I'm the only person who actually has an issue with that. Like I have talked with a few people. I talked with Jimmy as well about it, and he was like, "Dude, you're wrong." Like,
oh, what was the issue?
I don't know. Like, so when I first saw it, I found it really weird because it was like going from this grueling thing, and I think both are supposed to be grueling to like, but I didn't like the connection. That like I would have preferred to give the birthing scene its own thing and the fight its own thing, but it's more of a like I've been thinking about why I didn't like it, and I know that they said like at the start of the episode like the birthing bed is the woman's battlefield or something, but I found it pretty weird to like interpose this like forced C-section where she doesn't have any input on it with the fight. And also I was like super conflicted going back and forth with like shying away because I was like super it was grueling to watch, and I was like, oh no, Damon and Kristen are fighting, I want to see this. So my other issue is like I can never watch this Damon versus Kristen fight without having to see the birthing scene again.
So your issue is that in 6 years, when you're like, I want to YouTube search that fight, you won't be able to watch it.
No, that's not the main issue, but like that's part of it. But yeah, I don't know, like I can't really explain it, but for me, the whole juxtaposition just didn't work. But I like this stylistic choice of just juxtaposing, and I think on paper, like if you told me that's what you're doing, I was like, okay, that's a really interesting choice. But just the way it was there, I was like, okay, I feel like, and I think it's also related with my other issue with the episode is a bit of the pacing, because I feel like we went through a lot of stuff which you have to do in this pilot, because I think where the episode ends is a very logical place to end the first episode. But I felt like we went like after the birth, we directly went to the funeral, and we didn't really see Rhaenyra processing it. I think I at first also felt that we didn't really see Viserys process it, but I think with Viserys, they did a bit of a better job because his acting after that scene is quite impacted by this whole thing. But I think especially with Rhaenyra, I would have liked to see a bit more reaction. Yeah, that's something where I was like, maybe if they slowed down a bit and gave us a bit more fallout, I would have been okay with it. Like it's still an amazing scene, don't get me wrong. It's just I was conflicted about whether I like it, because I was also conflicted about the choice itself, about doing this like forced C-section. And I think I like it more now. But at first I was like, okay, should they have done this? How did you feel? Like, did you think it was a good choice to make?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it succeeded at what it was trying to do. It was trying to be horrifying.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I mean, it succeeded. It was definitely like it wouldn't have, like the way it is in the book, where it's like casually, it's like, oh, she died. Obviously didn't work. I also, for context, I was watching this with my dad, who has watched Game of Thrones but has not read the books, and to like, I had to be like, okay, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And I thought one of the things that worked really well was my dad was like, oh, there's no way it's going to be a son. He's going to be wrong. And I'm like, and I think this is from the book. It's that it is a son, and it's like,
yes.
I think there's some expression. I have no idea where it's from. That's like the second worst thing is not getting what you want, and the worst thing is getting what you want. And it's like, Viserys kind of got what he want, and then it still was like terrible.
Yes.
So like I actually think that was a lot more impactful than if it was just like stillborn, or like I feel like the kind of cliche thing would be like, oh, he kills the wife and then it's a daughter. Oh no. And it's like,
that I agree with.
So I thought this was better. I actually, you know what? I do agree that I like the last 5 minutes of the episode more. I thought that the conflict after that scene really gave the story like direction, which I think, like, if we just to compare this to season 1, episode 1 of Game of Thrones, which, for just preface, I like the pilot of Game of Thrones more, even though like visually it's way worse. The acting is probably worse, but I think it has more narrative thrust. And I also think from a characterization standpoint, this doesn't do quite as good of a job as establishing like the entire cast of characters. It's still done a good job compared to most other episodes. Like, obviously, Alicent, and I'm going to forget Targaryen names this entire bloody time. Rhaenyra.
Yes.
And obviously Daemon, Matt Smith. I like Matt Smith. Matt Smith being a dick is weird after Doctor Who, but I'll get used to that. And the Viserys actor, I almost want to feel like is the MVP, and I'm just waiting for Corlys Velaryon to get a bigger role. So.
Yes, I like what we got from it, but I was a bit disappointed that we got so little, especially of him and Rhaenys. I think Rhaenys was only in that tournament scene, right?
They'll have their time. They'll have their time.
For sure. Like I think, I don't know if I like. I do think I like the Game of Thrones pilot more, because like I was immediately hooked at the end of that. Like I think that's. Yeah, it's hard because they're quite different now. Like, I think they focus on different things. And I also think Game of Thrones is an easier pilot to execute than this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, Game of Thrones pilot, they could just almost go scene by scene. They obviously
literally were like 60 pages of let's literally do everything until Bran 2 from the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what they did. So, I think this is maybe more impressive in terms of like they had a weird story to adapt and make it make sense. But I think overall, because this also relies heavily on like I don't, maybe heavily is the wrong word, but like we know this world from Game of Thrones, right? Like this didn't have to introduce everything from scratch. So I think, do you think it would work as a standalone pilot?
That's an
Like,
interesting question, because actually someone at work was like, do I have to watch Game of Thrones? Because I was like, oh yeah, House of Dragon. They were like, I haven't watched Game of Thrones. And I'm like, I mean, you're not going to know what Maesters are. You're not going to know what the Hand of the King is. You're not going to know what's going on with Targaryens. I don't know if this would work very well if you hadn't watched Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
On the other hand, like, I think people would figure it out eventually, but I think it would be pretty confusing, which I suspect the people who haven't read Fire and Blood will actually like this episode more in hindsight. Like if you ask them after all of season 1 to go back and watch episode 1, they'll probably be like, I might get my dad to this, because I think my dad liked it, but he wasn't like, oh, that was amazing. Like he's less high on it than, you know, people who involved are. And I think,
but he's seen Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah. But it's just forgotten all the things from Game of Thrones. He remembered like Daenerys is a character. So, you know, I was explaining things during Game of Thrones to my family. I get to watch other people watch it. It's very entertaining, especially because some things are going to happen. And, you know, the way they've set up, in a non-spoiler, the way they've set up some conflicts for the future is going to be delicious to watch other people react to.
Yes, it's already super fun to see like how new people are reacting to this. And I'm just like, well...
It's funny, this is going to be funny because a lot of people watching this will have not read Fire and Blood. So yes, I'm talking to all. It's funny how completely wrong a lot of you are about where this is going. In some ways,
just the assumptions some people are making just based on one episode are interesting.
They think they have this entire story pinned down. They're like, oh, this is what it's going to be about. It's like,
yeah,
you thought Ned was the protagonist, so I'd be careful. George is many things. Predictable in the long term is not one of them.
That's true.
Actually, just predictable in general. It's not one of them.
In terms of like whether it's good for new people, I actually watched it with a few roommates. So most of them had seen Game of Thrones, so for them it was fine. But we had one person who didn't watch it, and I do think she had a little bit of more of an issue to kind of get into it. Like he was asking questions in between, like, why is this happening? Who are these people, basically? So I do think it maybe doesn't work as well standalone. I do think they relied quite a bit on.
But here's the more important question. Does it rely at all? I think it doesn't rely on specific knowledge from Game of Thrones, but general knowledge is the problem. Because when they made Game of Thrones, like they knew the people watching it don't know what the Hand of the King is. So they have to have like, you know, Robert and Ned be like, oh, the Hand of the King is like this. Like they obviously, it's George dialogue, so it's a lot better. Yeah. But they both communicated character dynamics and communicated to the person watching, like, okay, the Hand of the King is the second in command who basically does all the stuff the king can't be bothered with. So people just watch the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones and then be like, okay, bye. And then come watch House of the Dragon. You know, you can watch the first 6, but if you listen to most people, but if you listen to me, or you could watch the first 4 and then just only the scenes at the wall in season 5. Just saying.
I guess I don't know. I like seasons 5 and 6.
I know. Most people.
I had not read the books at that time, so like you read the books before me. Like you had read them before the show. So
I read them twice before you, sir. So
yes, I need to do a reread to officially be able to say that I read them as much as you.
Yeah, because right now you're a fake fan. Although you're not a fake House of the Dragon fan, because you've seen House of the Dragon episode 1 like 17 times at least.
I think the answer is just too much.
Do you actually just walk around with those headsets now with like House of the Dragon episode 1 in the background? For like all day?
No, not all day. I did do that yesterday. I just like to watch the last thing on repeat. It's funny that you actually asked me this because I have done this with the last thing. Because I was like, I can just listen to the music, but then I'm like, no, but the dialogue in the last thing is so good.
My ironic, okay. All right. Oh, the music. So Targaryen music. This is, but I love the Targaryen theme song. That's my background. I have a paper due in a day and need to bang out a 7-page paper. So I need music that's going to get me hyped. Like that's my go-to.
Yes.
And it led with that coming in on the dragon. Also, world building detail that show don't tell, but already I was like, okay, they're good at delivering world building. I love when the dragon flied over and just no one cared.
Yes,
And
there's one guy that cared.
Oh, there is. I only watched it once, but all the other people around were just like, "Oh, it's a dragon." It's like if a bird flies over. On the other hand, like, you know, even if an eagle flies over, maybe that's not realistic, because if an eagle flies over, I'm mostly like, "I look, an eagle."
Yeah, I guess. But the funny thing is that people did notice, like whoever's watching it, with my roommates, they were like, "Oh, people didn't even care that the dragon just flew over." So yes, very good way to just tell that. Yeah. I love the opening scene. I actually, like, we should have talked about the actual opening scene.
Oh yeah, council.
We are fake Jaehaerys fans.
Yeah, but that's old Jaehaerys. I want prime Jaehaerys.
I also want prime Jaehaerys, but still, okay. This is silly, but I kind of wanted. I had talked myself into that. Okay, they're going to do the Great Council like actually as a scene. Like, this was more like just a prologue, right? There was no actual dialogue there. I guess there was dialogue that the guy who announced Viserys, but I was hoping that we'd see Jaehaerys come on Vermithor, just land in Harrenhal. I was like, yes, and
yeah.
Okay, they're doing it as a 1 minute thing.
I kind of think in the last few years was like Jaehaerys was kind of senile and just no one wrote that because they like him so much.
Yeah.
But so I don't think he was really all there for the council. I think if he was all there, he would have just been like, this is the best answer, folks. I'm goated. Listen to me. But yeah, then the other opening scene was hype. Also, I saw I have seen like people who are Song of Ice and Fire fans complain about the writing of like 176 years before Game of Thrones. Which, yes, if you want to get super nitpicky, show Dany has a different birthday from book Dany because they aged her up. So technically it's wrong, but you know what? Who cares? And frankly, maybe this is canonical with book Dany. Whatever.
Let's not get into that because.
But anyways, it's not important. People are complaining like, oh, why do they have to have the text up? I'll have you know, my dad was like, what the hell is going on? And then the text came up and he was like, oh, now I know what's going on. So guys, for the people who aren't big fans, the text was helpful. Like,
I mean, the text is fine. My bigger question is, like, because they didn't specify how exactly they changed the timeline, because they said the council is in 101, and then they said now we're 9 years into Viserys' reign. Now, did they change when Jaehaerys died?
I don't know.
Because if Jaehaerys died in 101, then the timeline is correct. If all of this is in 110, then Dany's show date is correct. If they stick with the book date and Jaehaerys dies in 103, then it's like, it doesn't matter. The funny thing is only that this has actually started a discussion in the fandom. Like, are they basically ignoring like this and the prophecy? Like, are they ignoring show canon? And like, no. Like, I don't know why people would think that they're actually ignoring show canon. Anyway, that's not important. Like, I don't think this will matter at all.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah, again,
really, like, it could have just said a century and a half. It could have said 2 centuries. It doesn't matter. All people need to know is that all these people, all the casual fans need to know is that all these people in this show are long dead by the time of Game of Thrones.
Yes, I had seen a few people, like, I watched some trailer reactions while this was before this came out, and some people were like, "Oh, this is about young Dany." I was like, "What?" Like, some people didn't get from the trailers like what exactly.
And also, they don't know how far before is it. My dad, like, when he saw Jaehaerys, you know what he asked? The most insulting question of all time. He said, "Is that the Mad King?" And I'm like, "No, Dad, that's the opposite of the Mad King. That's the least Mad King." Okay, so yes, the text was necessary. People see the Targaryen king, and you have, like, most of these people haven't read Fire and Blood, folks. A lot of people haven't been like, oh, House of the Dragon, what's that about? Oh, it's following the Dance of the Dragons? Oh, I know exactly what that's referring to, and the relative time scale compared to A Song of Ice and Fire. Most people are like, oh, this is in the Game of Thrones world. Oh, it's a Targaryen. Which Targaryen? Who knows? Anyway, so I just wanted to say, yeah, the text thing, it was, you know, sometimes telling is more effective than showing, folks.
No, I was just going to say, because of what we were discussing previously, like, do you think there was an easy way to do this without making it clunky? Like you
Not
said, like show don't tell. How do you show that it's 172 years before Game of Thrones?
Yeah, and I feel like it have to be like as you know, good sir. But how do you do it? Because it's in the future. You can exposit that if something's in the past, like for a sequel. But it's hard to very quickly communicate the timelines. I mean, obviously, like the problem is you're trying to communicate it to the people who don't know what's going on. So yes, if people going into this had no idea what it was, like if someone tells you, oh, Balerion the Black Dread is dead, but Vagar is alive, you're going to be like, oh, I know where this is. But the people who don't know what's going on aren't going to do that. So
audience.
No, that's my point. I don't think any way you have to exposit it in a way that doesn't involve terrible dialogue is going to work for the general audience. And it was way too much work and would take way too much time. So just use the text and then people know what's going on. Like it was the way to go.
Yes, I agree. Anyway, we got hung up on this maybe for too long. Okay, who are your favorite characters in this? Let's say, like.
So taking away Fire and Blood bias from episode 1, the answer is Viserys.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I have a favorite character from this section from Fire and Blood, but that can be for the spoiler section, which we're probably gonna get to recording pretty soon. But just from this, it's Viserys. I actually think he was a really interesting character, and think it's that he was focused on like important stuff. It was just the wrong important stuff. He was worried about the lore stuff. Like he's just 200 years early. If he was around when the White Walkers were coming, it'd be really useful because he'd be like, guys, the political stuff, like we have to just chill. There are White Walkers, okay? But unfortunately, he's in the time where it's like he's like doing like, okay, we have to think about White Walkers, but the White Walkers aren't coming for 200 years. And there's a civil war brewing. Like you need to focus on the political stuff for Viserys. But I think that's like an interesting element to his character. Also, like him having his sword, I thought was kind of funny and very Viserys because it's like, are you gonna attack Daemon with your sword, bud? Like, I know he's not armed, but I'm still betting on him 10 out of 10 times.
I think he was armed. Like I think he walks around with Dark Sister all the time. But
I noticed he only had a knife. Present to the king.
Really?
Didn't bring a sword.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
That being said, Daemon with a dagger against Viserys with a sword. Who here is betting on Viserys? I'll bet on the 5 armored Kingsguard, though.
I don't know. It's not Kristen Cole, so
True.
maybe.
Also, did anyone laugh when Viserys was like some of the like the finest Kingsguard people? It's like there's been 20 years of peace. Like these Kingsguard people are thoroughly fine. They would get their crap wrecked by Prime Jaehaerys' Kingsguard.
I mean, aren't these Prime Jaehaerys' Kingsguard basically because Viserys didn't?
No, because when he got them, some of them were already kind of old. Some of them have died already.
Okay.
His because OG Kingsguard was the goated Kingsguard.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
He ruled for 59 years, Shake. Did the 55. OG King 55, sorry. Which may be different in the show. He ruled for a lot of years, Shake. Most of his original Kingsguard are dead.
But yeah, I don't remember his last Kingsguard, but I know that Ryan Redwine, the Lord Commander at this time, he's supposed to be like one of the best.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. If this Kingsguard fought any of like the Game of Thrones TV show Kingsguard, they would wreck their shit. Like even 5v7, I'm betting on him, but they are not the finest Kingsguard. Just like, I mean, that was one of the things like that got mentioned, like these knights, all the jousting is all they know. There hasn't really been a war for like 30 years. And there was a war that Jaehaerys won in like 5 minutes. Like, so it wasn't really a war. It was just like there's a war, and then Jaehaerys came in on a dragon and actually killed a dude like on foot. And they were just like, never mind, we are not fighting this guy. We've changed our mind. Actually, we didn't change our mind. We're just dead.
Yes. Yeah, but oh my god. Yeah. So for me, in terms of best characters, I actually like all three of the family, basically Viserys, Emma, and Rhaenyra. I think all three of them, like their scenes together, were the heart of the episode. I think on purpose. Like I loved the small scene we got with Rhaenyra and Emma at the start. It was funny. It kind of established Rhaenyra, which okay, yes, I have one more issue with the birthing scene, but I'll get to that. Then we had the scene with Viserys and Emma, where they were talking about like, okay, it's Emma basically like, this is too much. This is the last one, and then like, then the birthing scene, and then the funeral scene. I really love the funeral scene actually. Like, I think
Oh yeah,
Millie
me too.
Alcock, like, yeah, like her reaction. Also, like, best way to bring back Dracarys in like a completely different way than what you've seen in Game of Thrones. Like, so sad. And then yeah, the last scene. Like the last scene is by far my favorite. Like it gets me hyped. It does some things where I'm like, as a book fan, like they did some things that we'll talk about in the spoiler chat that I was like, yes. Um, and then yeah, I think those are the main scenes. I'd maybe put Damon in there as well because I liked his scenes with Viserys and Rhaenyra as well. But I think like the main three, yeah, the family was basically the main thing for me. Regarding the birthing scene, one thing that I have as an issue, because I apparently I'm complaining about an episode that I've watched 6 times, is that in the very first scene when Rhaenyra comes to Emma, she's like basically like, no, I have to take care of you, right? She's like, everybody's taking care of the baby, but somebody has to look after you. I think just the whole setting of the birth being in peril with the turning and nobody actually being there with Emma other than the Maesters, I thought that's weird to me.
Yeah, I guess Rainier is kind of like, not taking her over here, are you? But, when
Yeah,
she wasn't there, look what happened. So maybe she'll feel guilt about that later. Who knows?
Yeah, that's what I was confused because
I wonder
she
if
was
it's
also late.
Oh, also one other thing I want to bring up, because this was something where I was like, that's kind of dumb. And then I'm like, no, this is actually good characterization. It's Daemon's open helmet for jousting, which is an objectively dumb thing to do. Like,
yes,
don't do that. But then I'm like, actually, that's exactly the helmet he would wear. Never mind. This is actually this armor is communicating his character effectively. So good job. All right. This meeting is going to shut down in 2 minutes and 37 seconds, by the way.
yeah, I know. Do you have anything else quick for spoiler free, or should we switch?
I don't think so. I think we can end it, and then you can start the meeting. So you have the recording.
Yeah.
So, do I have anything else to spoiler free? I don't know. I thought this was really good. I could see this being a truly straight fire season of television, even if I think I still think I like the pilot of Game of Thrones more. I do think this has potential to be like as good as season 1. I think they had the harder start.
Yes.
They are starting at a point that isn't the beginning of a specific narrative. So authors who aren't named Steven Erikson build their narratives in a way so the reader can kind of figure out what's going on. And A Song of Ice and Fire, like Game of Thrones, the book, A Game of Thrones, had that. So the show Game of Thrones could use it the same way. While for adapting Fire and Blood, you just kind of have to pick a spot and go with it and help people figure it out. So I think like this show was always going to have a visual advantage over Game of Thrones because it has way better budget. But I think I was expecting episode 1 to have narrative disadvantages compared to episode 1 of a Game of Thrones. And so even though I like the start of a Game of Thrones more, I think this absolutely has the potential to be like a 10 out of 10 season, even if it's in aggregate.
Yes, I agree. That's what I think about it. Even though this isn't a 10 out of 10, I think overall it can still be that. Yeah, but I think they have some issues to work around with just the way the story is set up because they're covering a lot of time. So yeah, but we'll see that. Yeah. Other than that, that's also all.
All right.
I
think that is about it. If you want to see us talk about this episode, fully spoiling all of Fire and Blood and everything A Song of Ice and Fire related, then you can go over to Shake's channel. We'll probably upload them, coordinate them, upload them at the same time or something. Yeah, let us know what you think. If you want more of these, say nice things about Shake. Have a nice day, everyone.